I've got a cat that's probably gonna jump in front of me, so I'm gonna put the cat down.
Cool. All right. Richard Baylor, everyone. Yeah, thanks for joining us. yes, so we just watched Cirsium Delectus and Jesus Hates You. And this is like kind of like a slightly new cut that you sent us, right?
Yeah, so basically what happened was, and also thank you everybody for turning up to watch not just those two films, but the whole evening that Bruce has put on because it's a great festive entertainment. And I'm sure if you thought my films were very festive, when you see Damon and Marie Ange, you'll feel even more joyous about the holiday season. But yes, so basically what happened was these films were filmed from about 89 to 92 and then set in a box basically. And thanks to Ross Snyder and the team from Saturn's core, they literally tracked me down after many years of trying to find myself because I had no online presence and kind of hadn't really thought about these for many years. So they were packaged up on the Saturn's core release, Our World is Drowning and Going to Hell. But I started to do some local screenings, and it's one of those things when you're a director and you filmed them, and then you go back and watch them after a few years, and you think, oh, that scene was probably a little bit long. Oh, they're going to get bored watching that. So I curated a release party in Ipswich with the cast and crew and some of our friends,
Hmm.
and to try to make it all fit and have more time to drink and dance and listen to music, I cut the films down. And actually, I thought Cursium Delectus worked a little bit better at about 30-ish minutes instead of 45. And there was a little bit of repetitive scenery in Jesus Hates You as it continues to loop. So I don't think it lost anything, but it was an opportunity to just take some scissors to a few elongated scenes of driving around Ipswich.
Sure. And for any of the purists out there that want to see the movie how it was originally released, if you haven't seen it yet, that is all available in the Saturn Score box set that has all your work on it.
Excellent.
Um,
And I can't remember actually, but I do a small cameo. In that film, there's a few references to different films that I really enjoyed actually. And the opening sequence is from track 29, which I loved, Nicholas Roeg's film with
oh,
the
cool.
lorries passing is a scene from that. And there's obviously a link to Clockwork Orange with the head in the spaghetti. But my scene was a link to Police State by Nick Zedd.
Classic.
And I can't remember if I actually cut that bit out because it's me with a Stanley knife and a white shirt with a black tie. And I think I probably cut that on the. So if that wasn't in the film you watched, then you got to get the Saturn's Core to watch some pretty bad acting.
No, I love that scene. I love Nick Zedd too. Um, so you're known as well, like speaking of Nick Zedd, you're known as one of the forefronts of the UK later movement of the cinema of transgression that Nick started it in New York. Now you ran like was it like magazine and distribution out there as well?
So what ended up happening is I never embarked upon filmmaking with the thought I was going to package something up and release it. And I kind of got into it, love of cinema, from Kenneth Anger, Russ Meyer, John Waters, but it wasn't really till getting into the films of Richard Kern and Nick Zedd that I thought, you know what, actually, we've got our own scene, we've got our own style and ethos. Let's kind of create this stuff.
Mhm.
And then as you create it, then you think, well, that's kind of interesting. People kind of like it. What should I do with it? Should I make it available? So at that point in time, Film Threat magazine was used as an outlet for underground film, and Nick Zedd was putting out the Underground Film Bulletin in New York. So through getting tapes with Nick Zedd, then we started up a friendship. And as I started to have a distribution hub in Europe for my films, Nick said that the cinema of transgression had kind of run its course by the ending of the 80s, which is just about when I was starting. And so I offered to go ahead and promote and distribute Nick's films as well as the cinema of transgression, which was really an anthology,
Right.
and also started working with Cassandra Stark. and released her films over here as well. So
Awesome.
that sounds really grand, but what that really meant was I had multiple VCR tape players. I had a master tape from theirs and a photocopied cover, and so I would just be during my normal day, I would always have a video machine copying one of their tapes or one of mine, so I'd have 10 or 15 copies.
It's
The
got-
other thing that I did for them was because outside of the US uses a different video format, PAL, and
Right.
they hadn't had their films converted. So I converted their films so they could actually be watched. I happened to work off a US base and had a US and a UK video player, which was very unique at the time. So I
Oh,
was
wow. Yeah.
able to watch both. But people in Europe could not buy Richard Kern, Nick Zed, any of those tapes because they couldn't watch them on their home VCR players. So I helped him in that, and I continued all that distribution until I got my own self in trouble with the law based upon Cirsium Delectus and Jesus Hates You, and then we kind of moved everything out of the UK.
So, oh, you got into actual trouble for those.
Well, the police did a raid in on a thing called Video Nasties, which basically in the
Oh, right.
UK at that point in time, to distribute a film, it had to have a classification. But the classification process costs about 10 grand. So if you're basically selling videotapes that weren't classified, regardless of the content, you could get in trouble. But
Mhm.
based upon some of the content, you can get in a lot more trouble.
I see.
And so there was a raid in Manchester and they held one of my cassette tapes up that as an example of these the scourge of video nasties. And
Mhm.
so basically kind of, I'm doing this at home with a young family and kind of put it all in boxes, put it in my mate's loft, and then sent the distribution to another filmmaker in France called Costes, who's even far more transgressive than myself. And so he ended up being the individual who distributed my films back into the UK.
Oh,
So,
wow. Crazy. Crazy.
yeah, yeah. I mean, when we put the Saturn's core release together and reflected back on what it was like 35 years ago, there was nothing digital. People were still very easily offended. And so, kind of things that you take for granted now, back then was actually quite difficult. And one of my good friends ended up going to prison for 6 months for distributing uncertified cassette tapes that happened to be more S&M related. Mine aren't particularly of a sexual nature, although there's sex and violence and religion.
Hmm.
But, so they were truly, they would prosecute you if they, if you could not assume you would not be prosecuted if you got yourself into trouble. So
Sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I feel like luckily the world has kind of come a
yeah.
long way as far as censorship and film distribution and everything. But yeah, that's I feel lucky to not have sort of been around during that.
You can kind of do what you want. You can put it online. You can create your community, and you can kind of exist quite happily without fear of any kind of rec any
Repercussions.
with fear of punishment, I should say.
Sure.
Recriminations is what I was trying to say.
Uh-huh. So one of the craziest things that come from this film, you had said that that the real serial killer, Doug Clark, that the film was based on, ended up contacting you from prison. Um,
Yeah.
and from what I understand, this was not a one-time thing. You guys stayed in contact.
Yeah, so what happened was that there was a magazine. There's a couple of very transgressive magazines at this point in time. One of them was called Head Press, and then the other one was called Divinity. And they were the big promoters of not only my work, but Damon's work, who you're going to be seeing later
Mhm.
in the program, and would do lots of activities and film screenings, and it was everything that kind of pushed the boundaries on culture. But they had run a piece on Douglas Clark and Carol Bundy, and I knew I was going to make the next film. I wanted to be narrative in nature, not experimental like Jesus Hates You, and I wanted to push myself and do dialogue is really difficult as a director when you're using, friends and cast and crew. And I wanted to to get proper lights. I wanted to get a proper microphone, but I couldn't think of the narrative story. And as I read that story, what really piqued my interest was none of the characters are good, but is
Yeah.
there a degree of goodness versus badness? And is there the potential that Douglas got pinned on him these very bad things when in fact he got pulled under it?
Right.
And so I started to work on the piece, and I did contact the team from Head Press, who I knew very well. What do you think about Doug? And they said, don't connect with Doug. Just you go do your film, once it was out and I started to promote it, and I think it might have been in Film Threat. It, I think within a week I got a letter, and I opened it up from this military post box, and it just said P.O. San Quentin, and so I thought, okay, this is going to be interesting. He then basically just said, I'm aware you did a story about myself. I'd love to have access to it. I know I can't watch it, but can you please send a copy to these individuals? They kind of were working on his estate and on his behalf.
Hmm.
And he he
So
was
he wasn't
very
able to
open.
watch it.
I don't think he ever was able to watch it. I'm not
Gotcha.
100%. I think he might have been able to watch it somehow after the fact, but at that point he hadn't watched it. He was
Uh-huh.
just aware of it.
See.
But he did say, he goes, I appreciate that you are trying to do the story from a different perspective. And and basically then he goes, I would love to do a film with you, but what I'd like you to do is to take all of the case evidence, which I have. He represented himself in
Right.
court.
Uh-huh.
And I would like you to go film it, but I don't want anyone to see the faces. I only want people to see feet and noises. It was quite interesting. He really thought it out because he said, I want the audience, based upon the evidence, to make a decision actually to who is the real mastermind of the killings. So I said, that's brilliant, Doug, but I just spent 12 months of my life making this version.
Yeah.
However, I now own or have in my possession all of the police interview tapes of Carol
Wow.
Bundy, of Douglas Clark. I've got all of the court transcripts. I've got all of the supporting evidence that he put forward. He
Hmm.
just kept sending me, and I've got piles and piles of letters and things like that. So, you know, it kind of veered more about me understanding what it was like to be, on death row, and
Yeah.
it was kind of an interesting glimpse into it.
Well, if,
The
if anything, it sounds like your material for a great documentary.
Well, exactly, and it's interesting because actually, connected with Jasmine Hurst, who did the Eileen Warnos. She did a lot of interview footage of Eileen that's now used in the current Netflix documentary, which is actually very good.
Hmm.
Douglas wanted me to go to San Quentin and film him. This is probably around 92, I think. And then I got legal letters from the BBC who felt I was representing. It got really messy, and so it never did happen.
Uh-huh.
But the the one thing that I laugh about, but I shouldn't laugh about, this is probably the most bizarre thing that happened with Douglas Clark.
Uh-huh.
The band that I'm in we were doing a soundtrack release for all of my films, and the band I'm in thought, let's record Douglas Clark down the phone line from San Quentin doing a monologue that I'll set to some music. It will be part of this release. So a friend of mine that I went to high school with, I told him, I said, hey, listen, you're going to get a phone call at 8 o'clock on Sunday night. And I said, can you record this phone call? And he said, oh, who is it? I said, there's somebody on death row. You don't need to know. It's just going to keep beeping. This call's coming from San Quentin, the California Penal Institute. Anyhow, in the toing and froing of the dialogue to say, the mail was always intercepted, and they intercepted our communication and then put Douglas in solitary confinement. So I got this letter to say, hey, thanks, Richard. Thanks to you, I'm now in solitary confinement. I had my cell ransacked because of the material we were sending back and forth to state. They found controversial and contraband. So he laughed about it, but I was like, oh shit, I just put a serial killer on death row in solitary confinement for, I think it was there for like a week or 10 days or
Uh-huh.
something. But
Wow. That's wild. So, yeah, I've done a lot of research on this case myself. For for anyone that that doesn't know, I also coincidentally made a film based on these same murders, and I had never heard of you. Up until the Saturn's Core release, your work was not very well known in the
Yeah,
U.S. I mean, maybe it was in the '90s in the underground circuit, but like.
yeah,
And I watch a lot of weird underground
yeah,
stuff, and I just, I'd never heard of it. But Ross is like the king of finding that stuff, really.
yeah,
And when my movie came out, I was like, one of the first things he said to me is, he's like, "Yo, do you know Richard Baylor?" And I was like, no. I was like, oh, he's like, I'm pretty sure his movie is based on the same people as yours,
yeah,
um, so it's really interesting for me to see this, and also coincidentally, I tried to sort of reverse. I tried seeking Doug Clark out. You know, I know this guy named Ryan who runs Terror Vision and Graveface. He does a lot of work with convicted murderers and he
yeah,
runs a serial killer museum. I asked him if he either A had anything of Doug's or B knew how to contact him from prison, and he said, "I'll get
yeah,
back to you." And then something like I think like a month after A Corpse for Christmas came out, Doug died. Like
yeah,
the same summer. Um, but so we both did very different takes on the story, I'd say, and the real story is still something that neither of us quite have done.
yeah.
But I liked all like the real weird like drama. There's like, the Jack Merry character.
Yes.
And then there was like the little girl too, which I left the little girl
Yep.
out entirely.
Yeah.
You sort of
I
hinted
put the
towards.
little girl in. I put her in as a schoolgirl that was
Mhm.
used to basically become part of the blackmail as yet one more thing that Douglas would be found guilty of,
Right.
although from his perspective, he wasn't aware of it at the time because obviously my film, he gets drugged, ends up in bed. The young girl comes in, photos are taken, and then he's unaware until the very end when he realizes, well, I'm out of my depths. What the hell's going on? So,
Yeah. I feel like that's like a pretty safe way to shoot that in a way that people could still be entertained by your film,
yeah, yeah.
Because in real life, I think that went down a pretty dark road.
Yes, it did. Yeah, yeah.
All right, well, thanks for joining us, Richard. And can people check out your music anywhere?
Yeah, yeah, you can check out, just look up Earth Motherfucker. You can go on Instagram or whatever, and you couldn't find my stuff because I never digitized anything and I never created it's only because of the Saturn's Core release that I created Instagram account just because I thought it would be helpful. And actually, by
Mhm.
doing that, was exposed to this whole new world out there, and yourself being a great key player in that, and then really refreshing to see that how you and your cast and crew that you work with a lot have approached it from coming out of a music scene in a city, and you all want to be creative and push yourselves and push the boundaries. And, it was exactly what we were doing back, way back when. So it's really refreshing. And that Saturn's Core release kind of just opened the doors to kind of what's happening today because I wasn't really keeping my eye on the underground cinema scene too much either. So for me, it's been a really great exposure to what's going on today. And hopefully people appreciate the things that came before that allowed us to get where we're at today.
For sure. Yeah, it is cool to see that music and underground film has been sort of like linked, across continents and across time and
Yeah,
decades, and
yeah.
still like a similar approach, which is cool to look back and see stuff like this.
Excellent.
But yeah, all right. Thanks, Richard.
Well, no,
Take
thank
care.
you all very much for coming tonight, and thank you, Bruce, for making me part of the program and inviting me on to do the Zoom call with you.
Absolutely. Take care.
Excellent.
Awesome. All right, so I'll probably cut it there.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
the one thing I didn't say, I know I probably, if you think I rambled on too much,
No, I thought it
because
was
I
great.
tried to get,
Mhm.
the one thing though, I was gonna respond, but I thought it might be taking too long is I embarked upon that film thinking that Doug truly was not a good guy, but really turned out to be the scapegoat for Carol Bundy and Jack, right?
Yeah.
And all those interactions with him were pretty much like that for 2 years. But
Hmm.
in the third year, it took on a very different twist. And
Yeah.
I was interacting with, do you know Jerry Kane Rossi, who did Black Hearts Bleed Red with Joe Coleman?
Oh, yes. So I mean, I'm not super familiar with the director, but I do know that film. Mm.
Yeah, well, so her film came out about the same time, and I showed her films with my films over here in the UK. And she's kind of like, I kind of get this. You're the extension of the cinema of transgression, and she kind of got bolted onto that too, except she was in New York, a
Hmm.
bit like Charles Pinion was living in New York. I never did. And she was kind of in the same world, and she was dealing with Richard Ramirez and every serial killer. There was like this fan club out there, and every serial killer is innocent,
Yeah.
and everyone wants to just tell everybody why they're innocent and why they're, not supposed to be where they're at. And Doug was no different. But probably about the third year or maybe fourth year of all these interactions, he started to say, "Oh, I got these young girls in the UK who are really keen to connect with me. Uh, could you find their phone numbers because I can't get their numbers, but you live, And I was like, oh, that sounds a little bit strange. So I responded back, but I didn't respond back to his request for that. And
Wow.
then he sent me this other article. He goes, "Oh, I just come across this so and so. She's so misunderstood. It was an Australian lady who was arrested for necrophilia and
Wow.
killing somebody and having sex." And he goes, "Oh yeah, no, I need to make contact with her because." And then all of a sudden, this he was so adamant about his innocence.
Hmm.
Then all of a sudden it started to be like, can you get me young girls' phone numbers? And, can you figure out how I can connect with this girl? She's in prison for necrophilia. And I was like, okay, I kind of felt all right about it. And I justified it in my head
Yeah.
because I felt I didn't want to approach on it to kind of glorify, some really bad behavior. But it was
Right.
a great story. But all of a sudden, so the reason I called this little documentary thing called Staring into the Abyss was once you start dealing with like him on death row, at first it was quite interesting but after a while it was kind of like you start to stare into the abyss and the abyss does stare back and then you're thinking, okay, he actually is a serious character. I then got some legal things. This wasn't linked to him getting into solitary confinement about they felt I was misrepresenting another film company, and then they were going to have a court case. And then I'm like thinking, shit, am I gonna have to go to court in California, because of
Wow.
this? And
Yeah.
and and then I just stopped responding to the letters one day and just said,
Yeah.
okay, this was like 3 or 4 years after the movie had been made,
Yeah.
and I thought, actually. So if you ask me, did he do it? I would say I think he was highly involved in activities, even if he says he wasn't. But,
Yeah.
you know, there is a really good document. There's not a documentary. If you YouTube Douglas Clark, there is an interview of him.
I've seen a very
Not,
long one. Yeah. Hmm.
yeah, he is quite manic, He's
Yeah.
kind of standing up, he's very aggressive. And he talks about the head press guys in that and about the head press article. And he did tell me, he goes, I came in here innocent, but by the time, if you're on death row, you will go mad. You will become violent because you cannot survive in this environment. Because he's on the phone, you can hear people shouting and screaming, and he's like, "Shut the fuck up!" And the environment has got to be intense. So if
Yeah.
you were halfway sane going in there, you would end up.
Wow.
So,
Yeah. Insane.
but anyhow, brilliant. Well, listen, I really appreciate your energy and time. I've created a reel that kind of does the comparisons again and stuff like that. So I'll put it
Cool.
on Instagram
Awesome.
tomorrow. But I really do appreciate not only all you're doing for me and for Damon now, but just what you do for underground film. It's really great. So
Well, yeah, I love doing it, you know. It's
yeah,
it's important to me. I love this stuff. I love these movies. I love meeting
yeah,
people like you. So it's great.
yeah.
You know?
And even, the Hugh Gallagher connection, was just quite interesting, that kind of came up as well. I was going
Mhm.
to say what I could do. It'd be great to do something like if you're in your next production, I don't even know what it is, but even
Mhm.
I offered Casper that, if she ever needed some music or something that was thematically put together, that I'd be
Hey, that'd be
happy to
awesome. Hmm.
help create, even if it's just music, because visuals was a bit complicated. But if you ever get in your next project and you're looking for a piece of music, instrumental, noisy, chaotic, or just moody, then be more than happy to do something to just
Yeah.
kind of contribute.
I would love that, man. So I got two films on my schedule for 2026.
Yeah.
First, I'll be producing a film for Charles Pinion.
Yeah,
Um,
brilliant.
yeah, and then I'll be directing my own film in the summer, and that'll be sort of like a suicide cult film.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
the cult film would probably be very good for music like yours, I think.
Yeah, actually that would be really quite interesting.
Yeah. So I'm still working on the script. We're still pretty far out, but yeah, I'll keep you updated on that because that'd be really great to
Yeah,
have
yeah, no,
something.
I think that I'd love to do something like that,
Mhm.
use do something. Do,
Cool.
is this what you do for your job and you're able to earn enough or you've got to do stuff on the side or I could
No,
imagine.
yeah, I wish. I'm hoping one day it gets big enough that I
Yeah.
can live off this stuff. But no, I'm
Yeah.
a, I'm a, I'm a bartender.
Yeah, it's all right.
Yeah,
You got to do what you got to do.
yeah. But I am able to survive
Is it
bartending
drinking
part.
that Detroit Rock City or Iron City Brew or whatever?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I bartend 3 to 4 nights a week.
Okay.
So I still have a lot of time to work on film stuff and distribution.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't go into work until 5 o'clock at night, sometimes
Yeah.
7. So I have my whole
Yeah.
day to work, and then I've got 3 full days off. So, I
Yeah,
got
yeah.
plenty of time to work on film
Do
stuff
stuff. That's good.
and then yeah, and then I go
Yeah.
bartend. Bartending is a great way to like make money in a short period of time, so
Yeah.
without having to and you can like leave your job there. You don't have to go home and think about it like
Yeah,
other jobs.
exactly.
Hmm.
I think the thing what happened with myself was because it became a basically it was a hobby, and then
Hmm.
the hobby became more complicated, and I was married. I worked a night shift job on a military base. I
Yeah.
wasn't in the military, but I worked on a military base, and I had a 2-year-old daughter, and I played in a band,
Hmm.
and then Jesus Hates You. I probably did that at about a couple of weekends.
Yeah.
Basically, funny story. I went up to the council and I said, "Oh, can I film in that medieval church that I filmed in two churches, but it looks like I only filmed in one."
Yeah.
And they said, "Oh, what are you going to do in there?" And I said, "Oh, I'm going to film it was around Easter. I said, I'm just going to film an Easter play." Oh, yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
here's the key. Literally gave me the keys to a 14th century medieval church for the weekend,
That's
you
amazing.
know.
Yeah.
And I went to the costume shop and hired the priest's outfit, made the nun's outfit, and then filmed that stuff in there. And nobody would probably give anybody a keys to go into a church today without actually chaperoning them. So we basically could have done whatever we wanted in there.
Right.
But all of that was done really short, and I just chopped stuff together, lots of images. But Cursium Delectus was I pronounce it wrong, and I always have. It should be Cirsium, but
See,
you
I
know,
thought I was pronouncing it wrong when I
no,
heard you
no,
say
it's
it.
Latin. It should be Cirsium, but I called it Cursium, and it's kind of like stuck.
Uh,
But by the time you think about, where are you going to film this thing at? Who's going to be in it? What's the dialogue? You got to rehearse that a few times. I used to on a piece of paper do the shot so I knew what was going to happen. All that really, so I was working and then filming on weekends. And then when I'm at home, my head's like on a film set. And my wife's
yeah.
like, you're never here anymore. And
Yeah.
if you earn enough money to survive, brilliant. But
Yeah.
you still got to work, and I got to work, and so it all
Mm,
kind of came to a head, and that's why I
sure.
kind of packed it up after about 3 years, 3 or 4 years.
Totally. Yeah.
But it was all right. It was fun. And I'm glad, I'm having a little bit of a resurgence of stuff. But I
Mm.
don't really have the desire to go back and do it all over again. It is a lot of hard work, but I
It
do
is. It is a lot
enjoy
of
the
work. Yeah.
the creative visual aspects of it.
Yeah. I remember when when I was still with my now ex-fiance Sadie, after Corp, she really wanted me to take a year off,
Yeah.
because it does sort of take over your life,
Yeah. It's
direct.
not just filming it, it's all of that stuff that prep stays here and your
Yep.
editing and
Hmm.
publicity. Yeah.
Exactly. It's just it's on my mind all year
Yeah.
round. It's
Yeah.
I might my film you shoot it over a week or two, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, and then you edit it for a few months, then you
Yeah.
plan the tour, then you do the
Yeah.
tour, then you do the home video release, so it
Yes.
takes a year.
Yeah.
And I get it, it's like but it's also it's for me, I was like, well, this is like who I am though,
Yeah.
like
Exactly.
it is like what I'm passionate about. So I was like I understood her point of view. I'm like, yeah, I'm always doing that, but
Yeah.
so it goes.
You got to make life decisions and you got to
Yeah,
be happy with where your path is. So
right.
anyhow, well, congratulations on what you've achieved.
Thank you.
Each film is also, you can see there's constantly this progression and stuff like that. Black Coven was
Mhm.
really, really good. There's some amazing shots in there, actually. I
Thank you.
think the night shots kind of early in, they really are, really, really did look good. But I have to say, Christmas, just blew me away, probably because of the subject matter. But
Mhm.
there was a level of rawness and stuff. I think Casper's just
She's great.
a
Yeah.
great person on the screen, and kind of your attention she kind of attaches it. And the guy who played Douglas is actually was, in this kind of like slightly humorous way of
Yeah.
portraying this really evil guy because he is the bad guy,
Right. Hmm.
the
Honestly,
breakfast cereal on the tray and
Corpse for Christmas is still kind of my favorite film. I,
yeah.
I I don't know if it's necessarily like my best one. It's definitely my poorest received film, but it is my
Oh,
personal favorite.
yeah.
But I think maybe just because I set it on Christmas, it limits when people will
Yeah.
watch the film. So
Yeah.
so my other movies, people will buy it year round. Corpse for Christmas,
Yeah, I guess
like
maybe you,
you know,
you do have that. It is the Christmas. It's kind of like the Christmas number one. So you're going to get, every year it's going to come out. It's just the question of who's going to watch it on, in
right.
July.
Yeah, exactly.
Listen, so. But listen, I gotta take a work call, but I really
Cool.
appreciate you doing this. And like I
Absolutely.
said,
Hmm.
let me know what you think it's going to be in the schedule, because I'd like you to do the film screenings the way you would like them to be. And then if I
Yeah.
can make it work, I will. And if not, this will hopefully work well for you.
Cool. I will do.
And
All right.
Damon is a lovely guy. I hadn't talked to Damon since 1992, and
I should have asked you more about him and the thing, But yeah,
yeah,
that's
and
cool
so
that you get to know each other.
we did joint film screens. We this here's a hilarious one. Then I'll let you go.
Hmm.
So one of the guys from Head Press started a new magazine called Divinity. He ran the S&M clubs, and it was quite a fetishy magazine.
Hmm.
There's a place in London called the Torture Garden, which is in this old bunk. It's a amazing industrial thing. And so that night, the film screenings was Jesus Hates You and Archive Emetica and a
Hmm.
couple of others of mine. You had to walk in. There was a naked guy on the floor with a big old wooden door with nails, and you had to walk over the door to get in. So we get there at this event, and it's like 2 in the morning, and people are strapped to crosses and stuff like that. And then they said, right, it's the time to put the films on. And we're standing there, and the film projector goes, well, it wasn't a film projector, it was a video projector, and went,
Yeah.
"Eh," and then the video projector died after like 30 seconds.
Oh
And then it
no.
was like all these people, like, what the fuck? And then they went back to whipping each other and stuff like that. And we were like, oh, that was it. It was a great evening, but was, all this build up to how are they going to respond to these films? And then it lasted for 30 seconds and died.
Oh man. Oh man, what a bummer.
But
That's
yeah,
wild.
he is still making some really crazy, amazing stuff, and he's very methodical, very mechanical. There's a method to his madness and the numbering and the screens and so he does a lot of old film that he's been chopping up and repurposing and then new films. So I really enjoy what he's doing.
Yeah, he sent me a lot of stuff and yeah, like he'll send me multiple versions of the same. So like the one
Yeah,
movie
yeah,
Black
exactly. Different
Angel.
soundtrack or
Yep.
different colorizations. He's constantly
Mhm.
tinkering on stuff. Yeah,
Yeah, it's really interesting. But yeah. So
good, excellent. Well, I'm
all right,
glad you
man. Well,
connected with him.
I'll let you get to work.
Yep.
Thank you.
Sounds good. And thank you
Yeah.
very much. And we'll be in contact before Monday just in case I can make it happen.
Cool. Sounds great. Thanks, man.
All right.
All right, see you.
Cheers, Ed Bruce.